Welcome to the Driving Change podcast on the Evergreen Podcast Network, where we live at the intersection of neuroscience and storytelling. If you love great stories and you love understanding the mindset it takes to be a world-class change agent, then join us as our fascinating guests from all walks of life unpack their unique journeys of perseverance and passion, of expertise and experience, and be inspired to use your own story to drive change. Welcome back to the Driving Change podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Bloomfield, and today's episode, like all the episodes this season, is sponsored by Brain Trust. Go over to braintrustgrowth.com to learn more about how to be a more effective communicator. Now today, we get some of the coolest guests on the show. Today's not one. I'm kidding. Today is like one of my favorite days because this person I've met recently, it's somebody that I knew the name, but I didn't connect the story. And we're always trying to find the confluence between the science and the story. And today is this guy's an expert in this story. Joe Knopp, if you don't know the name, what you will know is some of the work that he's done. Now we're going to learn today the story behind the story of Joe Knopp. And he grew up in an orphanage in Philadelphia. That's all I'm going to tell you because we're going to get into that in a little bit more. A lot of tremendous challenges in life. He persevered, overcame, went into the military, served our country proudly, and then became successful in the financial industry and chased that nickel for a period of time. But then, driven by his passion to really be a storyteller and find God's true purpose for his life and his commitment to impacting lives, he transitioned into becoming a Hollywood film producer. Boy, that's a large transition, right? And he's done films I'm sure you've probably watched, like I Can Only Imagine, Woodlawn, Unplanned. It's a powerful pro-life film I recently watched with my family. It was really powerful. He did the documentary, The Trump I Know, which was fascinating to see that movie. We'll talk about that, told through primarily the lens and the eyes of the Trump family and Laura Trump and Eric Trump primarily, and then the folks in that circle. And they've resonated with people from all over the world. And this rags to riches story that Joe has is really built around, I think, all of our journeys of trying to find our purpose in life and using the gifts and talents God gave us to do something to drive change in the world, which is what he's done. So without further ado, we're in studio today with Mr. Joe Knopp. Joe, welcome.
Thanks, man. It's great to be able to hang out with you, not on a video or a Zoom call. So this is perfect.
Yeah, right in studio. So we're making it happen, and I feel intimidated. I mean, I'm in studio talking to a studio level Hollywood producer. Like I've got a little bit of imposter syndrome happening over here. Like you're usually the guy doing all the interviewing on these documentaries, and now the tables have turned.
Well, good. I'm glad you're uncomfortable, so that'll be fun for both of us. But I always say we all have a story, right? And people like for me to share my story, but I'm quick to remind people that God gave us each an individual story, but we have to understand it, and we really have to be able to reflect back on our journey so that we can share with others. So hopefully we can do some of that today. And you and I were talking over lunch about some of your journey and how you better understand who you are today because of that. So I love story. I can talk all day about story and how it can help people.
Love it. So let's start with the only question the guest always gets ahead of time, right? Is we heard this rumor that you grew up on the mean streets of Philadelphia in an orphanage, and it's a big part of your story. Take us back to your early days. Tell us your origin story, because I think a lot of people in our audience probably aren't familiar with you. If they are, only your name on the movies, right? Not really the backstory. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so I have two older sisters, and we were born and grew up initially in a place called Kensington of the Philadelphia area. So if you were to watch the news today, I believe it's still seen as the drug capital of the country, just a really, really rough area. And our family, our parents suffered from a variety pack of issues, of addictions, drugs, alcohol, sex. It was all probably within our household. And it was very common for the police to come to I always like that typical Philadelphia old school row house. The police would show up there and kind of break up whatever fight our mom and dad were having. And one night the police came and actually the paddy wagon, like the police van, was out front, and the police escorted my mother, my two sisters, and myself into the paddy wagon, and we kind of rolled away from the row house and our dad that night. And that I was 5 years old at the time, and to this day, I've never seen our father again. Unfortunately, our mom, didn't really have a place to take us to. I think we couch surfed for a few days, but we're basically homeless for about 2 years and just survived in that Kensington area of Philadelphia. And surviving meant, we would sleep in abandoned houses, probably call them crack houses today. Sometimes maybe on someone's couch, but just survived. I guess we were called street kids. Fortunately, my older sister happened to walk by this really small corner church one night, and there was a sign that said, "If you come to Sunday school, we'll give you free Dunkin' Donuts and orange juice." So my sisters and I would start going to this church on Sunday mornings. Our mom never went, and fortunately, some folks who attended that church just took notice to us, street kids, and one. It sounds like I'm telling like a movie scene here, but one cold November night, kind of that first like cold night of the season, this gentleman who attended the church, who lived in the suburban area, just had a heart for inner city Philadelphia, had a heart for the kids. He drove to the church that night to try to find our whereabouts. And when he tells the story, he just went in and out of the abandoned houses and found us kids, discovered which lady in that house was our mom, and asked her then and there, "Can I take your kids to a safe place tonight?" And he was doing some work with an orphanage in Philadelphia. So that night, I was 7 at that time. We hopped into to the church van that he was using, and he drove us to 2 separate orphanages that night. My sisters went to one, and I went to a separate one. And I was 7 years old at the time, and ended up staying there until I graduated high school.
So they split the separate orphanage because they were split with girls, guys, right
Girls
there.
and
Yeah.
boys, yeah. And then probably about a year and a half, 2 years later, they were able to reunite us into one dorm facility that had, they were trying to keep family units together. They found out that was a positive. So most of the time I was at the orphanage, I was with my sisters, except they were older, so they obviously left before I did. But yeah, so that was my upbringing.
Wow. So what happened like to your mom through all that time?
Yeah, so we would try to see her once a year. The gentleman is an amazing guy who placed us in the orphanage. He would come get us for a few days around the Christmas time period. And then he would also try to locate our mom and would try to invite her like to a meal. So I'd probably say half of the time growing up, we for Christmas, we would see her for a couple hours. But other than that, she was just, I always say kind of stereotypical, you know, lady just kind of survive on her own
Yeah.
in the mean streets of Philly. So
Wow. When's the last time you've spoken with that gentleman?
yeah,
Is that somebody you keep in touch with or have?
absolutely. Doesn't mind if I share it. His name is Wes Whitehead. Wes is probably 94 or so
Really?
right now. His wife Nancy passed away a couple years ago, so I was privileged to go to the funeral for that. So we really, whenever I get to Philadelphia, it's probably once or twice a year. We try to look him up and see how he's doing. He's got special meaning in my heart, obviously.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
great guy.
Now, so you basically grew up then in this dormitory orphanage environment. What was that like, and what kind of influences did you have that you look back on and say those are pretty good, and maybe those weren't so good?
Yeah, well, now that I'm a few years down the road, probably how I view it today versus at the time might be two different versions
Right.
of it. But at the time, you know, I we went to a local public school, went to a local church, so I was surrounded by at the time what I would call like normal people, normal families. But I just always felt like everyone knew my story. I felt like I had like orphan like stamped on my head, right? I
Uh,
just felt like I was always the odd one out, which is probably not fair because so many of the friends that I had and their families really went out of their way to just like embrace me. I was kind of their adopted son. But at the time, what I was feeling, I was so burned out being that kid, right? I was so
right.
burned out, really feeling like I never had one place that I actually truly belonged. I was able to be at a lot of different great places, but I just never felt like I belonged. And some of the probably best relationships that I had, we were very involved in this local church that we went to. So ironically, a guy that I work with still today, a guy named Daryl Lefevre, he was kind of like a Sunday school teacher, youth pastor, kind of always involved with my age group for many, many years. I would say definitely he went out of his way to kind of embrace me almost as a younger brother. But other than that, my sisters, I was, close to them. But it was kind of, I don't want to paint the picture of just like a lonely childhood, but definitely felt like I was one of a kind, kind of like living life on an island in other people's worlds.
You're carrying that, and now that you and I've talked about this a little bit, but we all carry some type of an orphan mentality as an identity in some ways spiritually, but even you had literally this unconscious orphan identity. And that was probably very difficult in your growing, especially as you go through those formative teenage years and you're trying to find your lane, right?
Yeah, at the same time, um, I can vividly remember being about a few months into the first orphanage I was at without my sisters, just living in the boys' dorm. That particular orphanage was old school, so they had their own school on campus. They had their own church. I don't know if I left that campus like twice in 1 year. We were just always there. But the chaplain was speaking one Sunday evening about God the Father and how like in Deuteronomy 31:6 and 9 he talks about just never leaving us nor forsaking us. And I truly felt those words go by my ear. We all have moments where we truly understand we're hearing from God or feeling the words from God. And that was one of those moments. I went back to my dorm that night and asked my dorm parents, like, how do I obtain that father who will honestly never leave? So they helped me, accept Christ into my heart, and really, from that moment on, I can honestly say I had this peaceful understanding that I did have this father figure alongside me. And it's interesting because it wasn't like this psychological crutch. It wasn't like this, made up friend that I had. I truly understood that no matter what I did, there was someone looking out for me. And I jokingly tell my kids that I feel sorry for you guys. I have two boys and a girl that you have me as an example of a father. And there's moments where I am not perfect. I only had this, this true understanding of a father who, no matter what I do, he'll be there alongside
Wow, what
me.
a gift that you were given in that midst of that. And maybe that's how God works, right?
Yeah, I think it
Gives
is
you
a
what
gift,
you needed in that moment.
and I wish more people understood that we all have access to that heavenly
Yeah.
Father, right? That I got to truly see and feel firsthand.
So from that point, you were drawn, and I know there's a little bit of a story there where you've discovered the military might be a place for you to make a means to an end kind of thing to the next step. Tell us how that transpired.
Yeah, so I couldn't afford college, and really the orphanage. We were kind of the odd kids out when we became teenagers. It wasn't really designed for older kids, so they did what they thought was best and really prepare us to be on our own. So that meant pay some rent, buy some groceries, and just get us ready for the real world. But at school, my friends were heading off to college, so I wanted the ability to do that. Didn't really understand the process or especially financially. So long story short, but I ended up going to University of Pittsburgh for about 4 days and realizing I could not afford that. And I was so naive to that process. So I left there, moved in with my sister, and that was not my ultimate goal either. And God again brought me by a big sign. I guess I need big signs in my life, and it was literally on an Air Force recruiter's window that said, free college if you enlist in the Air Force. So I knew no one that did anything with the military, but I went to the recruiter's office that day, and by the time I left, I was signed up, enlisted for a 6-year commitment in the Air Force, and I think I left a few months later to start my Air Force career.
Wow. All right. Well, let's take that chapter for a second. What were the top two or three lessons or stories that happened to you during your military experience that you carry with you today?
Yeah, so I don't think I've had that question before, so I appreciate that. You know, it by then I was a pretty disciplined guy. So like my kids joke around that they should join the military so they become more disciplined. I think for me, I was driving really hard. So I worked in the hospital. So I worked pretty much 8 to 5, Monday through Friday when I was active duty. And then I went to night school to get a finance degree. Um, One of the things that really still hits home today is the relationships that I had from there. Who we still reach out today. When I was growing up in the orphanage, I was so burned out on my story. Right? I really wasn't embracing it. I don't know if I was embarrassed by it, but I was just burned out on being that kid. So there's this amazing day in a basic training. It's like day 4, where you get your head shaven and everyone gets their uniforms issued. And for the first time in my life, I walked out into the parade ground. We all looked the same, like all 50 of us in our basic training flight. We all had the buzz hair. We all had the same fatigues on. And I never shared my story with a single person in the Air Force. Um, I think until I got out of the Air Force, no one even knew that I didn't have like a normal family situation, that I grew up in an orphanage. So it was after the fact that I realized, that story is part of who I am, and
Yeah.
I need to better understand that portion of me.
But in that moment, it felt refreshing, probably, right? To have you're at ground zero, everybody's equal. Doesn't matter where you come from. Doesn't matter what your background is. We're all starting over, a new chapter.
Yeah, and the word that always comes to mind is I belonged. Like
Yeah.
we were all the same. We were all one group, and we were all like people. And I was chasing that for such a long time, and I felt like I had finally achieved it.
Yeah.
Is what it felt like.
That's great. And so you got your finance degree, you're working in the hospital, and then you come out and, in the immortal words of Alan Jackson, chasing that neon rainbow. In your case, you decide to go down the financial, because you got a finance degree, makes sense,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that's your next steps to success in life, as you went into that space. Is that correct?
It is. So yes, I had a finance degree. Ended up going into the personal finance route, and really, it was at the time, for where I was from a motivation, not necessarily a great motivation, but I just wanted to be normal. I wanted to be, I always kind of jokingly said, I was so used to being at events where people were writing donation checks for me, for our cause. I always wanted to be the one writing the checks. So I got recruited by this financial firm, and they all looked the part. They wore the nice suits, they drove the nice cars, nice office, nice houses. And I just felt like that's who I wanted to be. And then, realized that the way they were working with clients was not the best fit for who I was from a character standpoint,
Mhm.
which can happen sometimes in a lot of industries, especially the financial services industry. And so I ended up leaving that practice and starting one on my own. Wasn't really the intention, but kind of how it developed.
Wow, interesting. You said something there that really struck me, is that you'd spent your life watching people write checks to donations for things that you needed support and help with, and it just, yeah, you can see that tension build up, especially in a young man, right? In a young man, where you're kind of, we're hardwired for provision and protection, and you reach this point where, like, daggone it, I don't want to be the one with getting the handout. I want to be the one giving the handout to somebody else, and that probably was a pretty strong motivator for you in that season of your life, I would think.
It was. I don't know why I was so I don't know if the word's embarrassed or just frustrated that just continually being handed out to. And my motivation, probably to a fault, was
Yeah.
is to be self-sufficient. And part of it, from some of the wrong materialistic standpoints, I wanted to be able to buy new clothes. When you're living in an orphanage, people drop off their old clothes, right?
Right.
Instead of going to Goodwill, they take them to the orphanage. So I vividly remember in high school, when I had my very first paycheck. I was a lifeguard, and I cashed it into actual cash. I don't even know if you can do that still today,
Yeah, right.
but they gave me cash, and I went to the mall, and I went to the Gap store and bought new clothes for the very first time. And in my mind, I just remember leaving there thinking, I'm a new man. Like, I'm a new person. Like, everyone's going to look at me differently. I'm going to feel different. Of course, we all know that you don't, but I
Right.
just knew walking out of there. So that just became, I guess I just fed into that mentality that I just want to be able to take care of myself. I want to be able to take care of my family one day, and be the one helping others instead of being handed out to.
Isn't that crazy though? I mean, there's some natural good things things in that, right? God drives us, especially as providers, to want to have that, to have the family and take care of them and provide and protect and all that. And yet the thing you're kind of running from a little bit was so much of who God started to, now we see rearview mirror. He's using your story to turn you into somebody that's really able to tell other people's stories more effectively. And isn't it funny? Like when you're in the middle of it though, it doesn't feel that way.
Yeah, which just seems to be how God works, right? Like after the fact, we can kind of connect some dots to figure it out.
Why doesn't he just tell us?
Or just
right?
give us
just tell us on the front side.
show us like a little like clip of like 6 months ahead. That's all for a reason. It's all going to make sense.
One of my favorite stories in the Bible is when Samuel's asked to go anoint the next king of Israel. And I tell people this all the time. I'm like, why do you think God will give you the next step when he didn't give it to Samuel? I mean, he could have just said, hey, go get the ruddy-headed kid in the field and anoint him king. And he made him go to the house of Jesse and go through all the brothers. Nope. And I'm like, it's because Samuel would have screwed it up. He would have probably messed it up along the way. So I think there's something to that, not giving us all the answers as we go, because we'll screw it up, right?
I'm sure I would. I would like to just have a clip. Give me a 10-second clip. Just that's going to be okay. Like, I'm going to be smiling at some point in time down the road, but it wasn't the case. But in the end, it definitely helped me understand that, just like Christ usually taught through story, and I know story is a big passion of yours and mine, and we could be here all day talking about story, but I've seen the impact that kind of my extreme story of growing up in an orphanage has been able to just I think give hope to a lot of folks out there. So
yeah, and I think it's what I love about this job, hosting this show, even is getting to meet people like yourself and knowing that I'm still not a finished product, and every day I get to learn something new about myself by learning something new about someone else. And I think the mistake or the myth that we're told as young people is that you got to figure out your purpose. And I think that's a myth, because you never figure, if your purpose is to try to accomplish and achieve and do whatever, here on this earth, it's probably always going to fall short. But if your purpose is to discover, love, and serve others and point people back to the Creator, I think you'll always feel more fulfilled. But it sure doesn't feel like that in the rat race every day, because we're supposed to chase the next thing. And you finally broke out of that cycle to some degree, right? When you left financial services and decided to, like, what was that day like? And what was that conversation like with your wife?
So really there's two different moments. First I left this other firm that wasn't a good fit, which my wife didn't even realize we were considering that. So then we were on this true God journey. I was so frustrated with folks really advising me to go make money, go make some money Monday through Friday. All the ministries out there, all the organized charities require money, and then dedicate your life to Christ on Sunday. And really like the separation between like Sunday and the rest of the week. So I felt like I was getting a lot of poor advice from a lot of folks. So that became this really like intense journey with God to figure out, all right, God, I am all in with you all the time, Monday through Friday plus the weekends. So professionally, initially, I ended up finding my own financial practice where I served about a dozen families, really helped them with all aspects of their money. But then a couple of years into that is when, ironically, this youth pastor guy that I grew up with, Daryl Lefevre,
The guy from Philly,
from when I was in the orphanage, he has the great story of like grinding his way out through the Hollywood system. And I mean, making no money, volunteering, then 20 years later, actually being involved in pretty big projects and having a big title with those. We would be on the phone, and he just wanted to tell like just good, inspiring faith story, kind of the reason he went to Hollywood to make movies. But Hollywood was kind of going a different direction. They were doing the tent poles, they were doing the Marvels, the DCs, and all of those types of stories. So he was complaining. I said, well, there's a lot of great stories in this country, in this world. Just go make your own. And, he was part of the system. So the studios had the money, they had the distribution. It was kind of hard to do that. But by then I was kind of the arrogant, entrepreneur, naive guy that said, well, let's go make your own movie. So I started flying out to LA to try to figure out if there was a way to help him. And then eventually this story about Woodlawn, true story, came to him, and we got involved with that. And that was kind of my leap from the financial world to the film world, which is pretty hilarious for my wife, because her and her friends, at the school that our kids were going to, they were kind of like, following my career and kind of bouncing around different places with Air Force or finance. So then she got to share with them, oh, now my husband's making movies, which of course they thought I was doing like wedding videos or something that was not going to be able to support our family. And it takes about a year and a half for a movie to get released. So for about a year and a half, my poor wife had to endure, what is your husband doing now? And a little hobby on the side. But eventually we released a movie, and at least they were able to see that we were, working at a real job.
So Woodlawn became, pretty well known, and that talk to the folks about how like one project. I think there's a misnomer, as I've gotten to know you privately. There's a misnomer that, man, you go home and sit on a big pile of cash and you just decide what movie to invest in next. And you're a Hollywood producer, so I mean, you must be like Spielberg and you got your own private jet. And I mean, it's not as glamorous sometimes, right? It's hard, and to go from one project to the next and figure out. So talk to folks about, they might be interested to know like what happens. Okay, Woodlawn's done, you release it, great. Now what?
Yeah, so exactly right. It's a little harder behind the scenes than what people realize. So you released a movie, and movies are really fascinating. You spend, in this case, 2.5 years for this one moment. It's a Friday night when the movie gets released, and we have access to the data. We literally know how many tickets are being bought nationwide. And in your mind, you kind of have this bar for how many people need to watch that movie for you to be able to, make some money at it and hopefully go do the next one. And Woodlawn, unfortunately, not enough people showed up at the theater to watch it as we had expected or needed to. So it was a great story, impacted literally thousands, tens of thousands of people from a story standpoint. So uber successful from a storytelling standpoint. But from a financial standpoint, it was a grind, and really kind of a gut punch because, maybe arrogance, because we felt like we made a good story, especially in the faith world. We felt like we were really elevating the bar, having some really good actors involved, like John Voight and Sean Astin. So
you had Rudy, for crying out loud.
We had Rudy, yeah, and it was great. Actually, it's a funny story. I went to Notre Dame to do an event with Rudy, with Sean Astin, and I truly believe that if the Pope was there, they still would have ran over to Sean Astin to say hi, and not the Pope. He's an iconic figure on that campus, but a great guy. But for us, so after the movie came out, it was kind of this gut punch for why did not more people come out and support and see this movie. So for us, it was back to the grinding stone of what do we do next? And it's literally like, people come to us all the time with movie ideas or story ideas. And we were trying to grind and find a story that really, what we realized was marketing and awareness of the movie, of the story. People just didn't know what Woodlawn was or what it meant or what it was about. So we were really trying to seek a story that already had some traction from an awareness standpoint. And God ended up bringing us the story of I Can Only Imagine, even though the industry kind of gave up on it and they didn't think there was a story there. Fortunately, my team realized that there was a lot more to that story than what was being told. And we, and even that, looking back, it was this great, successful movie that a lot of people love and love to share it. But when you're making it, you have no idea. We just got gut punched on our previous movie. So you're grinding away. It's not easy to raise the funds for those types of projects. So that was kind of my role, to raise the funds for it. So you're once again, after a not very successful project, you're trying to convince more people to help you do your next one. And, and God has a way of delivering funds. I always say like a day late, but it's probably on time for in his world. But we were able to get that story made and get Dennis Quaid, which was an amazing story, to get him involved in that project. And then God just like you blessed the song by itself, he blessed the movie also.
Yeah. And it's such a still a wildly popular film. And what I like about your approach, and I guess this is probably not new to the filmmaking world, is and you and I were talking about this, is you're always digging to hear what is that backstory, because people will know that, okay, well, Mercy Me and then the song and but there's a whole lot of story that really makes the movie come to life in
There is.
the pre, right? The origin story, as you, if you will. Tell a little bit about your philosophy on that. What do you look for when you're digging into a story like that? Before you go, hey, this has more than just what everybody knows about, which is the song.
Yeah, so often we see the success, right? And this is true for so many aspects of life. We see people for their success. We don't see what it took to get them there, and especially from a faith standpoint, from a believer standpoint, you know, and throughout the Bible, God has a way of, the valleys before the peaks can be very deep and dark, and I would argue the deeper the valley, the higher the peaks. So, for an example, with the I Can Only Imagine story, people knew that it was kind of their breakout song, and it went viral from all the radio stations that were out there, secular, country, everybody was playing that song, and it just resonated with a lot of people. But the backstory of it, it really took Bart to this, total surrender moment in his life where he just got to the point where he threw his hands up in the air, both with his journey with his dad, with his music career. And when he truly gave it to God, he was able to, really kind of better understand his dad, better understand, kind of work with his relationship with his dad, really help his dad at a time where he was, about to pass away, and it really birthed the lyrics to that song that we all, know and love today. But what Bart had to, Bart Miller, the writer who the movie is about, what he had to endure to get to that point, to get to those lyrics, it was hell on earth for quite some time.
Yeah, you creatives, man, I'll tell you, you guys are willing to endure a lot of pain. No, I jokingly say that. I think sometimes the world will tell you that the safe place, take the safe path, safe bet. You do what you're supposed to do what's expected, climb into the box. The box is a shield, stay there. And then people really never become what God intended them to be because, they've got to go through those hardships like Bart did. Like you and I've talked about, like these valleys that we go through, that we know they're designed so that we can perform the next climb. And that's what I love about that story. It has nothing to do with the song at all. At all. I mean, really, it's really about that peaks and valleys of his struggle and the relationships and what he discovered about himself and what he discovered about his faith.
Yeah, and really, in songs, and I've learned a lot about the music industry. They're 3.5 minute stories, and I think when Bart got to the point where he was vulnerable enough, kind of that surrender moment, and now vulnerable enough to really share his life journey, his raw feelings. That's what the audience connected to,
Right.
which is the same goal with what we're doing here, storytelling, or in the movies, is when you can be just raw and vulnerable and just share the core of what you experience of where you're at. Well, that's most people today, as they go through a hard time, they feel alone. They feel
Yeah.
like no one has ever been here. No one could possibly relate to what they're going through. But man, if you can grab them where they're at and give them what I call like an on ramp to a story that they can relate to, they will jump on board with a chance of hope that if someone else endured this, if someone else got through this hard time, maybe I can. That's where I feel like I'm really passionate about people understanding their journey. But as a believers, if we don't understand how God operates, so if we don't study the Old Testament, we don't study the New Testament, because if you do, you'll see patterns of how God operates. Doesn't mean it's the same every time, but you'll see threads, you'll see similarities with these stories where, to the point where if we believe them, and I believe them all wholeheartedly, then that's the same God that I get to have access to today, who has taken me through a journey. And he doesn't promise a bunch of happy days and a bunch of peaks. It's peaks and valleys. But if we understand that, it's all for a cause, all for a reason, might not be about us. Moses didn't go into the promised land. He got there, he got to
Right.
look at it, but he didn't get to cross that line. If we accept that and we understand how God operates and we see it in our own lives and we're willing to surrender when we get to that point, I think God can use us in our stories in miraculous ways.
Totally agree. Love that. So from I can only imagine then what's next. So you jumped off of that one, and of course now you're independently wealthy because you bought the mansion on the hill and all that, and because you're a Hollywood producer. So it's just again, now
Yes.
your pile of cash you're sitting on is even bigger for the next project, right?
A Hollywood producer living in Dayton, Ohio, and still trying to, there's a lot of people involved in making these movies. So a lot of money goes a lot of places. So we were not independently wealthy. And it's always that balance from a professional standpoint, from a monetative, money standpoint, and from a God standpoint, right? What do we do next? So it's funny because, family and friends, my wife, we just had this amazing family friendly movie, kind of really, I would almost argue, like pioneering like a new space, right? This faith friendly but secular friendly story. So let's just go do that for the rest of our life. And so of course, I would say God's sense of humor as he was giving us opportunities for other stories to tell. My friend Daryl and I, one of the stories that came our way was this pro-life movie called Unplanned, about the story of Abby Johnson. So when I would be out speaking about, I Can Only Imagine or Woodlawn, the first question people say, what's next? What are you working on now? And we didn't quite know at the time. I would kind of go through the stories that were possibilities, try to be honest about that. And I would always end it with, oh, and we have this pro-life movie called Unplanned. And I tell you, like, never failed. Somebody, you see them coming afterwards, and they're in line to talk to you, and they just tell you their heartfelt story for why the pro-life issue was their cause.
Yeah.
And if you ever get to working on that story, please, here's my information. Let me know. I'd love to help out. And you hear that enough times, and it's like God's way of saying, when you're ready, this is what we're going to do next. So it was a funny moment going to share with my wife one night that I know we just came off of this highly successful family-friendly movie, and now we're doing an abortion movie called Unplanned, which, of course, who wants to go watch an abortion play out on a movie screen on a Friday night? But we just felt like God was telling us that was going to be our next project, so that's what we did.
Yeah, and I'm sure it brought you nothing but positive accolades, right? I mean, you just
everybody was
rocketed to the top of the.
Everybody was so excited about it, and the country has never been divided on an issue like that. It was, I think 2018 was when we were working on that.
Yeah.
I mean, the country was maybe not at the peak, but getting close to the peak of division on the life issue. All the rumors about Roe trying to overturn that, the 50th year anniversary, and so everybody was talking about it, which was good and bad for doing a movie at that time. I was in charge of a lot of the marketing for the story. So I live in Dayton, Ohio, but I started getting phone calls from people that I watch on TV, like the Ted Cruz's of the world, the Josh Hawleys and James Langford, folks from DC who, it's funny because I was kind of seen as a, the conservative film producer willing to take a risk, right? We were just trying to be obedient. So I would start to go to DC and speak at these different events. And then I got a call from the White House. Vice President Pence's team invited me to share the movie with him and meet with him at the White House. So all of these surreal moments about the life issue. But that story, again, it was a way for a lot of people who were involved in the abortion industry or who had experienced abortion somewhere in their life before. That story had many on-ramps for people to relate to the redemption story that occurred in that movie. And I hope a lot of, and I know from being reached out to, a lot of hope was provided, and I think a lot of lives were changed as a result of that.
Well, and I'll just say this, personally, if you're listening, and I know just the topic of abortion causes you to probably get some anxiety level because of what's happened in the narrative of our country. I would just say that it's one of though there's times it's a tough film to watch. I felt like the tastefulness and class of which you told Abby's story, and the lessons that are learned, whether you agree or disagree, whether you're pro-choice or pro-life, I think what I loved about it was this is what is real. Like this is what happens, and this is what everyone is facing. And you can argue either side of it, but your film did a nice job of saying, hey, this is this person's experience of being pro-choice and leading a clinic, and then recognizing that she didn't even know what was really happening, and then it turned her into pro-life. And here's all the reasons why, and it's her literal story. So it's not like you can debate the facts. And it wasn't an in-your-face thing. It was such a great job of putting an issue out there that's controversial, but laying it out in a storytelling fashion and letting people just recognize and just sit in the emotion of it.
Well, you cannot argue with a true story. Like when
Right.
I share my story, if anyone wants to argue with me, they can, but I will win. It's my story. It's what I
Right. This was her
experienced.
story. Right.
And what's great about storytelling, and especially in the film world, is if you can find the extreme story. So Abby in the abortion world was the extreme story of a lady who had two abortions of her own. She not only worked for Planned Parenthood, but she was Employee of the Year for that organization. And then when she saw firsthand an abortion occur just by chance. They asked her to help out in a procedure one day. When she saw what she was really embracing for 8 years, it crushed her
Rector,
heart and
right.
spirit. It wrecked her. It allowed her to see firsthand what was really happening. So it's kind of that ultimate Saul to Paul moment where that story allows so many people to relate with her. All these on roads for, hey, I'm pro-choice. Abby was pro-choice. I had an abortion. Abby had an abortion. But to be able to see Abby's redemption story, and to be able to see, really her accept God's forgiveness for what she had been complicit with, and to move on and make a dramatic change. And to this day, I love talking to Abby because she's such a strong, powerful woman who is just changing individuals' lives every single day, fighting for people. So, and that story, that's what I love about what I get to do for a living. If we can find these extreme stories
Yeah.
that people can relate to, and provide on ramps for people to listen and get that hope handed to them, it's just a great way to impact.
Well, that's what I love about your stories in general is it opens up dialogue, and it gives people a chance to talk about tough issues. I mean, even if you go from Woodlawn to I Can Only Imagine to Unplanned, like all three of those have threads of familial undertones to them that we all deal with, and to have a neutral medium like a film to then go, hey, why don't we talk about what's happening around our Thanksgiving table? Because I love that your movies do that. They open us up to taking something that might otherwise just keep getting shoved under the rug in our relationships, and then let's just have a non-emotional, non-judgmental conversation about how we feel about these topics. And it's super, super helpful.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, because the goal is, if we can honor our audience and respect them by providing a quality product, providing, recognizable high level talent, where you and I can, and I do this, invite a friend, invite a neighbor to go to the movie theater and maybe grab some food afterward, or grab
Yeah.
some ice cream on the way home, because you can talk about it.
Right.
So you can kind of like Trojan horse, the truth of a story, and then just talk about it afterward. And it's just a great conversation starter. And so that's our goal. That's our desire with these projects, especially, my passion is to be able to find these hot topic issues that are out there, but, allow the audience to be really empathetic on both sides, and hopefully
Right.
come out with the truth being known.
So coming out of Unplanned, okay, so now you created a film that is, polarizing half the country, but hopefully created some dialogue. And you thought, hey, this might be my lane. So let's go pick another topic that's polarizing half the country. How did you get connected with the Trump family? Because then you ended up doing this documentary, which is amazing. Tell that story.
Yeah, and the funny thing about from an audience standpoint, after we did the Unplanned, the abortion movie, my wife almost like breathed a sigh of relief that we can't do anything more controversial than the abortion issue. We found out what is. That would be Trump. Can be more divisive. But when I was doing the marketing for Unplanned, it was a pretty funny moment for me. I was literally in Vice President Pence's office, and at the end, he was very gracious, and he was going to help promote the story of Unplanned. And he asked, is there anything else I can do? And I asked if I could meet his boss or someone in his boss's family. And so they introduced me to Laura Trump, who ultimately became a really dear friend of mine. She also was a TV producer for the show Inside Edition for 4 years. She had a journalism degree. So we both have a passion for kind of telling our stories, a conservative, real side of stories. But in January of 2020, when COVID was about to strike, my team was supposed to go to Ireland and do a movie on St. Patrick. COVID shut all that down. And, within a few weeks from there, I was talking to Laura Trump on the phone, and it was kind of ramping up the 2020 election time period. And something happened in the news cycle about her father-in-law and women. And Laura's funny kind of went on this rant about the amazing women that have worked for Trump for 20 plus years in the company, who have ran the campaign, working in the White House. A lot of firsts with women, like Kellyanne Conway, the first campaign manager to win, and all these, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, all these amazing women. And at the end, when Laura, I said, you should really let me tell those stories. We should go around and not like at some formal interview. We should hop in their living rooms and just share about these women and let them tell their stories. So Laura was very gracious to invite me to DC, meet with some of the family, and get permission to really be Laura's and Eric's kind of sidekick for a few months. And just wherever they went, we interviewed amazing women, and all three, in the company, in the campaign office, and in the White House. Just be able to share the real side of these women who actually know President Trump. That's where we got the title from. They would all say at the end, I wish people knew the Trump that I know, because I actually know him. I've worked for him for the past 20 years or 10 years, and I see the real man that the media will never share with you. That was kind of our desire.
And that was a fast thing. I don't know, all the people in the film, I found interesting learning a little bit more about them. For some odd reason, I was struck by the vineyard lady, the lady that ran the vineyard. Because here she is, and she's promoted to run this vineyard down there. And yet when he comes to visit her, she's so nervous, and he treats her like royalty. And her telling of this was so authentically, it was casual, but it was so authentic and real. I don't know why I was taken by her version of her experiences.
Well, it was great because Eric and Laura, it got to the point where I was almost embarrassed by the amount of people they were offering for us to interview. So Carrie Willard really was the first person, still to this day, to run the Trump vineyard in Virginia. So Eric said, "Oh, you got to go meet with her." So this poor lady gets a phone call from Eric. So you're going to do what he says. By the way, there's a film crew coming out. They're doing a little documentary. Spend a day with them. So we show up, and she was just the nicest, most gracious lady. And she just showed us around. So as she's showing us around this, I think I could be wrong here, 1,200 acre vineyard in Virginia, which I didn't even know was a thing. I didn't know. I made the mistake of saying I didn't realize there were vineyards in Virginia. She very quickly corrected me that it's the same latitude all around the world: France, Napa, Virginia. So I learned a lot.
Go back to Dayton, Hollywood guy.
Exactly. But it was so great because, and as you know, and as we've talked about, she was showing us around the vineyard. She's so proud of what they've been able to do there. So you ask all these questions. And so she told these amazing stories about Eric and President Trump, who, would just, the three of them being in a Suburban, just driving around the property. And President Trump would always get the door for her and just act like a gentleman should act, which shouldn't. It's unfortunate we're a day and age where that's surprising to hear that a man was acting like a gentleman, but he was. So we definitely were able to get just kind of her raw story, which was kind of the goal of the documentary, because that's how she truly feels about the family. They've taken good care of her.
I'd encourage people to watch it. I mean, whether you're a Trump fan or not, it gives you a really good context of other people in the orbit and how they feel. It gives you a good idea of who they are as people and what their lives are like, but then also what it's like to be in that orbit, which can't be easy. Now, I had a question for you about the movie that I thought was, again, one of my favorite parts is so real is, you toward the end, you get a chance to sit down with President Trump. And yet you're waiting. Like they stick you in the room there, and you're supposed to meet with them in the next 10 minutes, whatever. And then what was the true length of time from when you were supposed to meet with them versus when you actually got to sit down and meet with them?
So there's always some creative liberties that you take. I mean, it all occurs, but creative timing. So the real story behind that, my director, I hope he doesn't hear this because he'll be spinning over right now. But so our goal from day one of filming, right, was to be able to interview the president. And we knew we had a good chance of that. We were working with the family, but it's not guaranteed, right? The guy's actually a pretty busy man.
Yeah,
And
maybe.
there's a lot of people to go through from scheduling, even if you're, and it's not easy to get a 7-person film crew into the White House. So anyway, we didn't know what was going to happen. So we're like 8 weeks into filming the documentary, and we're on a very crunch time. It's COVID. We have to release it before the election. And our crew was, I don't say burned out, but they were ready for a break. We're just traveling the country. We're in DC. We finally we said, hey, we have nothing scheduled for next week. Let's just send them home. So we did. On a Friday, everyone flew home, which meant, from DC back to California. I go back to Ohio. Monday morning, like 2 days later, I got a phone call from Laura, and she's like, the good news is we have an interview this Wednesday morning with my father-in-law at the White House. She said, now I think you sent your crew home. Are you able to get them back in time? So we scrambled, and of course, we had to get everybody back to DC. Real quick side funny story. The Secret Service, they're pretty aware of, they need to be aware of everybody coming and vehicles that are going to come on the property. So I had to get the VIN of my sport utility because we didn't have time to rent a car. So I drive to DC. My camera guys flew in from LA, and they take their red eye. They show up in typical, camera guy outfit, like jeans and a maybe not a Rips t-shirt,
Right.
but not the cleanest t-shirt, right? And I pick them up at the airport. We go pick up the cameras. We rent our equipment. So we pick up the cameras, we piece them together, and we have a meeting at the White House to do a scout. We're going to look at several rooms to see what would be the best area for us for filming. And we are driving to the White House, and I tell my 2 camera guys, you need to put your suits on. We were getting ready to meet, and they don't have any.
Right.
They're like, well, we were going to buy them tonight for the interview tomorrow. It's not till tomorrow.
Right.
So I'm like, do you have anything that you can actually wear to the White House? And it was funny. One guy had a rolled up bomber jacket that he threw over his t-shirt. And one guy had a rolled up, I think maybe a sports coat that he threw on. So I'm not even sure we're going to get into the White House to do this. But anyway, we did. And of course, we meet the head butler for the White House, who is beyond dressed to the nines and beyond professional. Yeah. So everywhere he showed us around the White House, it became the joke. This is the film crew coming tomorrow, apologizing for us as we walked through there. But then
he's apologizing as he goes.
100%. I'm sure
because Trump's he's a pretty starchy guy, right? You got to look the part.
Yeah, for sure. So the next morning, it's the big interview day.
Yeah,
and my team and I, the 2 camera guys, we had to take all the equipment to a Secret Service place. Had to go through everything.
Right.
The cool thing was then we got to have a Secret Service convoy to the White House, which for me was pretty cool, driving in the middle of the Secret Service.
Did you
convoy.
film any of that?
We had to be careful.
I was going to say,
Secret Service is a little sensitive about filming.
Yeah.
So we definitely didn't show any of that. So it was funny. We pull up to the White House, right? Here it is, the White House. Surreal for me. And the guard who literally the guy with the M16 standing at the guard shack, Secret Service peeled off, left me with them. And just the epitome of a military guy who should be guarding the White House, comes up to my window and says, can you read, sir? I'm like, great, what I miss now? And a big sign that says, turn off your engine. So he's like, I guess it's your first time at the White House. And yeah, definitely, first time. So he was very.
You didn't drop the Air Force card on him. You should have given him the military.
No, I was pretty careful with my words at that point, but he was very fun and gracious. So he said, I said, where should I park? Right? I said, where do you park at the White House? He's like, park wherever you want. So I parked under the carport, which was pretty cool, of the White House, so we could unload our vehicle. And all morning long, we had a mid-morning interview time scheduled with the president. And we were way ahead of schedule. We're there early. We get all the lighting ready to go, get the cameras, everything's ready to go. And the advanced team within the White House, they're always one meeting ahead of the president. All morning, they're like, you're not going to believe this, but the president, he's ahead of schedule. So you're going to have an extra 15, 20 minutes with the president. So we're just total God thing. Everything is going great. And then to even add on to that, Laura Trump was in the White House doing a meeting at that time. I didn't know it.
Right.
She texted me. So first of all, it's like surreal. Like I'm in the White House, Laura Trump's texting me. She said, "Hey Joe, grab one of your camera guys. I'm upstairs with the president and we're having a meeting with women. It'd be a great footage for the documentary."
Wow.
So I'm like, that is amazing, but like I don't know where to go. So she's like, "Well, just grab your camera guy and find stairs. We're on the second floor."
It's the White House, right?
So I'm like, "All right, well, this will either work out well or not." So I grab my camera guy. I'm like, "Hey, come with me. We're supposed to go upstairs." So we literally, it was. I wish somebody was filming us. We found a staircase.
Yeah.
We go up to the second floor, and there's like 4 or 5 big rooms, and one of them I could tell it was kind of like half open, and there's a bunch of phones on the outside on a table. So that's where the meeting was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Evidently, if you have a meeting with the president, you leave your phone outside. So we go there, and there's no one to like open the door or show us in. So I kind of sheepishly
Peeking
open
in.
the door, and there's a scene in the documentary where it's President Trump and like a dozen women, and it's like it's Ivanka, Kellyanne, it's Mrs. Pence, and Laura. They're all at this table, and the president looks over, glances as if he knew we were going to be there. He had no idea, and just kind of shook his head and just continued on in the meeting. And we circled around for like once, and I got pretty uncomfortable, and we bailed back out. So then we go back downstairs. We're just waiting for the president, and the advance guy came in and said, "Something happened. Can't tell you about it. He can't meet with you." And we're like, just deflated, just
Right.
devastated. And I went outside into the main hallway and
Cried.
what to do. I just try to figure out because you don't get this opportunity again.
Right.
And I knew that the elevator that he would be coming down on, if you turn right, it's where the West Wing, it's where the Oval Office is, or if you turn left, that's where we were in the residence. And he came down, looked over at us, and he's an amazing guy. He just honored his commitment. He came towards us, and someone gave him my name. I don't want anyone to think that I'm on a first name basis. He said, "Joe, are we ready for the interview?" And I said, "Well, sir, actually, we're waiting on your daughter-in-law. Like, Laura was in that meeting with you, and she hasn't come down yet." And he's like, "Oh, well, thank God I have time to sit down and tie my shoe." So my very first conversation with the president, he was sitting on a chair and like tying his shoe.
That's awesome.
It was pretty cool. And part of me, as I look back and reflect on who he is, I think he just knew that would be a more comfortable start to relationship. So we had this great casual conversation as he's tying his shoe, and then Laura came down, and we hopped into the formal chairs and did then the second funny thing was his team they were just chomping at the bit to get him into whatever meeting,
The next thing, yeah.
which was far more important than us. And so the president said, "Okay, what's the first thing you want to talk about?" And what we had done and what I have learned in the movie world, I did like a 2-minute sizzle reel of everybody we interviewed, just kind of saying really nice, authentic things about the president. So so I said, "Well, sir, I was going to show you this video of the people that we interviewed, but if we don't have time," he's like, "I'm the president. We have time." So I got to show him on my iPad this 2-minute video, and then it became this great interview. And
Yeah,
time.
what a great idea.
Yeah.
Now, how nervous were you in that moment? Because or you're caught up in this is what you do, and the adrenaline's going, so you don't really recognize that the nerves are supposed to be a lot worse than they are right now.
It's all the above, because what goes through your head is I'm sitting with the president, right? Like, the most powerful.
It doesn't matter who the president is, by the way. It's just you're sitting in the White House in a room with the president, the leader of the free world.
And then
he's talking to you.
And he's right. And you have to ask him what to talk about. So it was just that surreal feeling the whole time, probably more so than nerves.
Yeah.
Just surreal.
Like an out of body experience kind of thing.
Yeah, all of that. And the good thing was by then I was pretty good friends with Laura. So I knew that if I said or froze or did anything, she just hit me in the back of the head and take over. But
she's got that skill set, right? From inside edition, all of her training. She could jump right in and clean it up. Yeah.
And the good thing about President Trump, at least, is I think he would answer a question even if you didn't ask it. He knows what he needs to say. So he was great. But I will say he's funny, and he was great with the team. He makes sure he looks everybody in the eye. And I would argue probably one of the best listeners I've ever been around. I think that's why he has been as successful as he is. I think he has a gut feeling for when people are speaking the truth. Yeah. And I think when he's in a room full of people, he can sit back, listen, observe, and he'll know who needs something from him and who is there to help and serve.
He's got a good BS detector.
I think he does.
Yeah. Seems like it. I've heard that before. Wow, what a great experience. I mean, it's a potentially a once in a lifetime experience, right? That and you were there for a
100%.
while and you got to be a part of that whole journey. That's
Yeah, we
incredible.
got to hang out. It was surreal. I got to go to the White House a fair amount and interview all these
You've been to
amazing.
Mar-a-Lago a few times, right? Or a couple times or
I
whatever and had
have,
dinner down
yeah.
there. That's
I've been able to develop just good friendship with the family, and they're authentically really amazing people.
well, what I want the listeners to know is that, I know you're just an average Joe. And I mean that in the best of sense, right? You're a suburban dad outside of Dayton, Springboro, Ohio, and you're just such a humble guy. And to have that experience and get to do that, how many people are ever going to get to say they did that?
Probably not a whole lot.
Not
The
a
more
lot,
I share my
right?
journey with, it's definitely a very fortunate and blessed to be able to have
Yeah,
that
that's
experience.
incredible.
And they with my family, my son has gone with me a few times, and they treat him like one of theirs. And yeah, they've treated us really well.
That's awesome. So let's talk then next about as you continue down this journey. What I want to get into as we close is what is in your mind, man, if you could just forget about the money, forget about any idea of fame and all that stuff, like what do you really want to do now in this next chapter of your life with this gift you have? What would be, this is perfection. If I could paint this picture, Jeff, this is what I would do with the next 10, 20 years of my life.
What I would like to do is to utilize story, and that can be in all the formats, right? We're doing a podcast now. There's radio, there's TV, there's the big screen, the movie theaters. We live in such a strange time from people are hurting in all different areas. Ironically, even though we're more connected than ever, right? We carry these phones around. We feel like we're connected to people. We have never been more lonely as a society,
Right.
and loneliness is a dangerous place to reside,
It's the
right?
true epidemic that we have
It
right
is a
now.
true
Yeah.
epidemic, but it's in a very deceiving way because we feel like we're connected to people. So I would love to share stories that are relative to all the suffering that's out there, and let people know that you are not alone. You never have been alone. There are others going through what you're going through, even maybe exponentially worse than what you're going through right now. And there's redemption stories out there. There's hope out there. So I would just love to share stories with people that provide hope and give them the courage that no matter what they're facing, whether it's health or family or relationship or financial, that they can get through it. They can't get through it alone, but they can get through it with God, with family, with friends, and others have. And I just think through the ages, stories have been around to help encourage others and to let people know that you can relate to what someone else has done. So if I do nothing else for the next however many years I have on this planet, is to share stories that are impactful, that provide hope, that maybe even kick people in the butt and motivate people, and just help people live their best life, the life that God has given to them.
You know what I love about stories, and yours is one that's so richly dynamic, and sometimes we don't pause to then look at it in its totality. And so if you're listening out there today, I want you to think back and walk with me through Joe's story for a second and tell me what would have happened differently had it not fallen in this order. So he's an orphan living on the streets. He ends up in an orphanage, ultimately through a series of events, meets a guy by the name of Daryl Lefevre, who ends up being a pseudo big brother mentor to him. He then goes off and learns some other things God's teaching him about who he is and what he's to become. And the guy that he met back in Philadelphia years and years ago suddenly becomes somebody that he starts realizing that his next step in life is about storytelling through film, and then partners with Daryl to start to do these things. And then you look at how the building blocks and the stepping stones happen in your life. One thing had to have happened to lead to the other, to lead you to where you are today. And I feel like that's everyone's story. And we just don't take the time to step back and look at our own origin story all the way back and recognize, man, I had a lot of crappy things. I hit a lot of potholes, but if I hadn't hit that pothole, I wouldn't have gotten over to that garage and met that mechanic who then introduced me to this person. And I think God ordains and designs those things in our life for us to truly come to the fruition of who he made us to be. And it's the journey that gives us the skill set and the experiences to go then pour that back into others. Isn't that amazing to think about that?
And I think it's so important to look in that rearview mirror and connect those dots, right? I think so many times we extract out the negative that happened
Yeah,
to us, or what, and we look at someone else who seems to have this perfect life, everything given to them, and we want to have this "woe is me" attitude. But the reality of it is, there are so many blessings that occur on our journey and out of the blue that if we look at the positive and we see the positive connection points and where God has stepped in and oftentimes protect us from ourselves, there's no reason to think he won't do that going forward. So whatever you're
that's
going
right.
through now, whatever you're going through now is going to be a story, another chapter in your journey, a year from now. So just be able to connect those dots and use what you see in that rear view mirror and really compare that to how God operates, right? That's why I see it's really important to understand these
Yeah.
Old Testament stories, these New Testament stories. 'Cause if you understand how God operates, you can relate that to your own journey through that rear view mirror. You're going to be a force to reckon with going forward, whether you feel it or not.
It's so hard. I know you're listening. Some people they like to say, "Well, but Jeff, Joe, you don't understand my story." And it's so hard sometimes to look in the rearview mirror and have a spirit of gratitude because of the journey you've been on. And yet you and I hear these stories over. We've lived our own versions of these stories over and over again. And at some point, I just want to encourage you out there listening, look in that rear view mirror and see how many dark clouds you can have gratitude for. And then, because it's hard to have gratitude out the windshield because you don't even know what's happened yet, so don't know to be grateful for it. You can only be grateful for what's happened, not what will happen. You can be pre-grateful, I guess, and I think you're a testament to that. And I want to thank you for coming on the show and sharing your story and your journey. You can hear it in my voice. I'm fired up. I'm excited. I'm like, okay, what do I need to be more thankful for that's happened to me, and what am I supposed to do with it now as I look out the windshield? And so, thank you for being an encouragement to me. I know you've been an encouragement to all of our listeners.
I sincerely appreciate what you do. I was going to say, with the hardest day of my life was literally getting dropped off at an orphanage on my own without any family whatsoever, but it has become the biggest blessing in disguise because I've had a bad day. Like that's behind me. Like there will
Yeah.
not be a worse day compared to that for me. So, and God showed up. So yeah, just encourage everybody out there that take inventory of all the grateful things that have occurred in your life and just know there's far more in store for you going forward. But more importantly, take those grateful things that have occurred to you and share it with others. Let people see that side of you also.
Well, awesome. Well, folks listening out there, I know Joe's working on some stuff behind the scenes. Just keep an eye on him because his next project is probably not too far away. And if it's anything like the ones he just released recently, it's going to be a home run. And we just we pray blessings over your story, your gift, your career, and I know that abundance is just right around the corner for what God's going to do with you. And thank you for who you are.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate what you do here. It's just another avenue to get story out there.
Awesome. Well, we'll have you back on when you're ready to release the next project. How's that?
I'll be here.
All right. We'll see you then.